Welcome back to the Rainbow Bridge Podcast. I'm your host, Miss Nayshondra Mercer, but as always, you can call me Coach Nay. And oh, by the way, today we're going to be talking about the lies you tell. Yes, my friends, we are going to be talking about the lies you tell. So background on that phrase, the lies you tell. If you haven't heard my Southern twang, I am a good and country Southern thing from Columbia, South Carolina. And my mother and her side of the family is from Charleston, South Carolina. They are Charlestonian and Geechee. And my dad's family, which mostly lives in New York, but resides from the Caribbean and the Virgin Islands, Haiti and Jamaica, you know that there are different words and lingos and sayings and such based on where it is that you're from, right? Especially the different type of melanin that you have. So for my African American Black woman self, whose family resides out of Charleston, South Carolina, the Geechee, Gullah Geechee dialect is one where we've got sayings that you don't hear everywhere else. You know, it's a Southern thing to speak in idioms, to speak in riddles, things of that nature. And it just kind of comes very inherently in the Gullah Geechee dialect. And so you may hear somebody say something like the lies you tell if, let's say, for instance, a child is talking to their mother and the child is flat out lying. And mom knows the child is lying because this is mom's child, right? But the child is doing the best that it can to pull one over on mom. And mom just busts out with the lies you tell. And that right there will stop the child in their tracks because mom has just called them a liar. And I love this saying because it's not necessarily the fact that one person is actually calling another one a liar. It's the fact that they're calling out that this person is telling a lie. And I think that there's a difference between somebody who is a liar and somebody who is telling a lie. And when the Gullah Geechees use the lies you tell, it is a way to get you back in check and let you know that you're not being true to who it is that you truly are, because you're telling a story right now. You're flat out lying, and that's not something that you do. And that is the title of this story, because I want to differentiate the difference between when we are telling lies, and especially when we are telling lies to ourselves, and when the enemy is lying. Because the biggest difference between a person who tells a lie and a person who is the liar, those characteristics are demonstrated, and we find those in the enemy. Some folks call him the devil. Some people call him the enemy. Some of you might call them the inner you. But however you feel, or, you know, whatever it is that you use to represent the dark or the evil or the imposter or the opposition in you, and that is present in the world, that individual, my friends, is a freaking liar. And we're here today to talk about the lies that the enemy likes to tell, that we tend to sometimes internalize and believe to be our own personal truths. And I want to speak to you specifically about the lies that I used to tell myself and the lies that Nay told. And I realized that these were all things that the enemy had whispered in my ear that I decided to touch and agree with him on, and began to believe about myself, even though those things were not true. And I know that I'm not alone in that, and that's why I share this. And I want to share with you the story of when I decided to confront the enemy's lies and what I used to get me through that season in my life when I was combating lots of lies that I had told myself. So at this time, I was about 28 years old, and I was in between relationships, and I went from one toxic relationship to another that was even more toxic. And after I exited that toxic relationship, something that individual said set me off and made me begin to explore all the pieces of myself that I had discovered during that relationship that I did not like about myself. I decided that I wanted to go and look at those things, drag them out the back of my closet, shake them off, dust them out, and clean them all up and get them washed again so that I could be the person that I knew that I wanted to be, the higher self that I saw when I thought about the way that I wanted to show up in the world and how I wanted to show up in the world and the legacy, shall I say, of who I am that I wanted to leave here on earth. And when I started grabbing those things out of the back of my closet and started dusting them off and shaking them off and getting them all cleaned up again and doing the soul work, I realized that my closet had gotten so dirty because I just believed all the lies. I had gotten comfortable with the back of my closet, the back of my brain, the depths of my psyche being dirty and cluttered. I'd gotten comfortable with how it felt to be there and not having to have the responsibility to wash the clothes that were stuffed down at the bottom of the barrel just because I didn't want to. I got comfortable with the things that the enemy had said to me, so much so that I began to internalize his lies as my truth, my new personal truth, and I began to govern myself by that. And when I did that, my friends, that is what it looks like when you decide that your way is better than the divine way that God has for you. When you give in and you submit to your own will, your own desires, the way that you want to do things, how you want to do them, when you want to do them, who you want to do them with, when you start doing that and you get really comfortable with the dark pieces of yourself that, although you should learn to accept, should may not be the right word, although we do want to honor and incorporate, we want to do so in a space in a way that is healthy and not one that makes us show up as a version that's lesser than our higher self, right? And so some of the lies that I had been telling myself during that time and that I had believed from the enemy saying were things like I was unlovable. I believed that some of the horrible experiences that I'd gone through, such as instances with intimate partner violence and things being physical and being harmed in a couple of situations, it took not wanting to go back to places like that to want to do the work and undo the lies of the enemy so that I wouldn't find myself in those kinds of situations ever again. And so I started calling the enemy out on his lies, calling Nay out on the lies that she was telling herself. And so whenever I began to hear those internal thoughts or that wind in my ears that we've been talking about, when I began to hear the voices of my toxic relationships in the back of my head that continued to reinforce in my mind that I was unlovable and I would never be happy, that I would never get the things that I had set myself out for, the things that I hoped and dreamed for myself, and that I was all these things that I knew in my heart that I wasn't, I would call the enemy out on his lies. And for me, that looked like, in the beginning, wanting to get control of my thoughts. That looked like me speaking out loud against those things. So if I was just hanging out or doing anything on my day-to-day and I all of a sudden heard a whisper in my ear that said one of those things, one of those lies that I was telling myself, that I was unlovable, that I'd never be happy, that I could never have the life that I wanted, that I would never be free, that I would never ever feel free from all the pain that I had been in previously, I would say out loud, I rebuke that thought. And it might sound silly to say, like, I talk to myself. But if that does seem silly to you, then this isn't the right podcast for you, right? So you're here, you're rocking with me, which means that you want to hear what I have to say about it. And so I would say out loud, I rebuke that thought. And once I got in the habit, every time that I thought a negative thought that I said out loud, I rebuked that thought. I finally got in the habit of recognizing every time, so many times, that the enemy was saying something to me that I was agreeing with him about. And when I started hearing how often I kept saying, I rebuke that thought, as I went about my day, the more I realized how important it was for me to be saying it out loud, because it brought my awareness to my thoughts. And for the first time, I was able to think something, sit with that thought long enough to really pull it apart in my brain and tear the pieces out and look at all the different parts to determine how I really felt about it. And then make a decision that I wanted to follow through with, that felt good for me and true in my heart, instead of just making a snap decision about a thought that I had and falling in line with it. And once I kept doing that and saying I rebuke that thought, I was able to grow more and more awareness around this process of the grabbing the thoughts. As the Bible says, you grab every thought that's not like God and you grab it captive. So in my mind, I would think about my hand literally reaching out into the air every time I had a negative thought, like a cloud. I think about my mind as a blue cloud. When I teach my meditation classes, I say, think of your mind like a clear blue sky, and the clouds are your thoughts. And no matter whether it's thunderstorming or not, we know that if we get in a plane and we fly above the clouds, that the sun is still shining up there. And the same is true for your mind. Sometimes we have big fluffy clouds that look like bunnies, and sometimes we have those little linky, stringy looking ones, and sometimes they're thunderstorms. But no matter what, the blue sky is there underneath it. And so whenever I saw a cloud in my blue sky that was a dark cloud and a negative thought from the enemy, I would visualize myself literally reaching out, grabbing that cloud, snatching it down, just like the word says, to hold every thought captive. And I would bring it down into my fist and shove it down into my other fist and crush it in my mind and think, no, the devil is a liar and I am. And then instead speak the opposite of the lie. So if he said I was unlovable, I would reach up into my sky, grab that dark cloud, crush it in one fist, slam it into the other, and say, no, I am lovable. I am kind. I am gracious. I am generous, and speak life over those negative, dark thoughts. And the more I did this, the easier it became. And the more second nature it became. And then the more I was able to apply that same concept to other places in my life to gain that same kind of control over every other area in my life as it pertains to me. Because only I can control myself and my thoughts. And a man or a woman that has mastered themselves has mastered the art of leadership. Because how you lead yourself in any given situation speaks to who you truly are at your core. And we want to be the kind of people who are strong and stable in the things that we think and the things that we do, because that means no matter what goes on around us, we can't be swayed. Because we're rooted on a firm foundation. The Bible says a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. If one man thinks a certain way and does something different, he's double-minded in what he does. But if you can bring your thoughts about yourself and you can hold yourself and your truths steady so that you are unmoved and you lead yourself and you have control of yourself, it doesn't matter what situation comes at you. You'll forever be able to govern yourself. And that is the goal of self-control. But my friends, we can only do that if we first begin to tame our mind and our thoughts. Because that is where the battle is won. The enemy comes after your mind. Because if he can change the way you think, he can change the way you see the world. And in the same way he can alter the way that you can see the world in a negative way, you can fight him at his own game, and you can change your mindset so that you can see it in the goodness and the graciousness that it really is intended to be by God. And to do that, my friends, we have to first get in control of the lies we tell. If you made it to the end, my friends, thank you for rocking with me for yet another week of the Rainbow Bridge podcast. I truly appreciate connecting with you on this soul journey, and I appreciate you being a counterpart of mine as I continue to walk this earth on my personal journey. Thank you for being a part of it. If you want to continue this journey with me, even outside of the podcast, you can always find me on my Instagram and Facebook. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please let your girl know. Feel free to leave me a review wherever it is that you love to listen to your podcast. And remember to like and subscribe so you don't ever miss another episode from me. I'll see you guys next week. And until then, my friends, be safe and be well.
This has been a Forecast Media Podcast Network presentation. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. For more information and more great Forecast Media content, visit pushplaypods.com.
Forget whatever plans you have this weekend because you're staying at home and playing on SpinQuest. And there's never been a better time to sign up than right now. New users get $30 coin packs for just $10. All the table games you love with hundreds of slot games and real cash prizes. That's at spinquest.com. SPINQUEST.com.
SpinQuest is a free-to-play social casino. Void where prohibited. Visit spinquest.com for more details.
More than just warmth, a fireplace is a timeless piece of art in your home to gather family and friends around. Bart Fireside has the Midland's best selection and experts to make sure everything goes smoothly, from new construction to that remodel you've been considering. See gas, wood, and electric fireplaces in person at 1131 Broad River Road or at bartfireside.com.